Story time about the scariest night of my life. A lot of background information. So the one weekend, my sister and I decided that we were going to go to my stepdad's, and her best friend was going to come also. I was around 13 at the time. Well, my stepdad and my mom had been broken up for about a few months, but my dad was okay with us going to our stepdad's because he had been with our mom for around 7 years and he's always been good to us. And my stepdad's was 2 hours away. So fast forward, we get to his house, and my sister and her friend wanted to go to a party. Now, me being older now, I knew that they didn't want to bring me because they were around 16 and I was only 13, but I still tried to tag along. Well, they weren't really talking to me or anything, and I hadn't seen my mom in almost a year. So I told my stepdad that I wanted to go and see her, which was a super big deal because she absolutely hated my stepdad and she didn't want him around us. And by the way, she lived like 5 minutes from him. So if she found out that we went all the way up there to see him and not her, she would have flipped. So he drives me to my mom's house, like for part 2. Part 2 about the worst night of my life. So before I got to my mom's house, I called her. And I pretty much just told her that I was with my stepdad and I wanted to come see her. Like I said, she lived 5 minutes away. So as soon as we pull up, she walks outside. And she starts screaming at my stepdad. She's like, "Those are my kids. You're not allowed to see them, blah, blah, blah." Even though my dad had full custody and he could decide who we could and couldn't see. So after that, we walk in the house. She isn't saying anything. And this house is pretty much like a trap house. There was a knife holding the door shut. Not a kitchen knife, like an actual knife that you stab people with. She's like, "You can sit down, make yourself comfortable." And I didn't want to sit down because I saw needles everywhere and I just saw a rat crawl under the couch. So I was like, "No, I'm fine." And then she was like, "Sorry, not everybody can be rich like you." Which, just to make clear, I'm not rich. I just knew that she was doing drugs with her boyfriend in that house. After that, she pulls the knife that was holding the door shut out and points it right at me, like for part 3. Part 3 about the worst night of my life. So before she points the knife at me, she had been in the kitchen, right? So I went to go and sneak out the door. That's whenever she ran over, ripped the knife out of the door, and pointed it right at me. And she's like screaming a bunch of shit at me. And she's like, "Oh, what, are you gonna tell your dad that I pointed a knife at you?" And I told her, "Yeah, like, what the fuck do you mean? Am I not gonna tell him?" So at this point, she tries to take my phone. I told her, "No, you're not taking my phone." And at this time, my sister's also texting me and yelling at me because she had told me that I should not go to my mom's house. Probably for that exact reason. A few minutes later, she hears her boyfriend pull up. I had never met her boyfriend. Like I said, I haven't seen her in probably almost a year. As soon as she hears him pull up, she looks at me and she says, "Go out the back door." She literally hurries up, takes me to the back door, and I have to run out the back door. I don't even know where I am. My sister and stepdad were waiting at the gas station across the street, so I ran over there really quickly. And then a few things happened after that. Let me know if you guys want a part 4. Part 4 about the worst night of my life. Just a little side note, I am in bed, so it's going to be a black screen, and you can probably hear my dog snoring. I'm just going to go from my point of view the rest of the time because I texted my sister, but I think she's sleeping. So pretty much I had to call my sister after my mom told her to go out the back door. And there was a sheets right across from where she was. But since she had to go out the back, she just saw like all woods and no gas station. So I got on the phone with her. She runs over to the gas station. And when we get back to my stepdad's house, we call our dad and let him know what happened. And the police actually got involved. And they had called my dad because my mom had called them and told him a bunch of stuff that just wasn't true. Like saying that my stepdad was a pedophile and stuff. Just like saying stuff that could actually ruin this man's life. And usually my stepdad would come pick us up and then drop us back off. But the police said that my dad had to come get us tomorrow morning, even though he had full custody and could decide who we could go with and stuff. So my dad came the next day and picked us up.
I feel like a lot of people undermine the importance of mental illnesses, and this is exactly why they should never be taken lightly. Audie Sanchez was a 33-year-old mother of a 3-week-old baby. She had severe mental illnesses but was never given proper care for them. She started to hear voices in her head and became very paranoid. These voices were telling her that she needed to get rid of her baby because the devil was inside of him. Once she started hearing these voices telling her these things, she tried to admit herself into a psychiatric hospital, but they denied her, sent her home with some medication, and told her, "Hey, you're crazy, but you're gonna have to deal with it by yourself." Audie was aware that these thoughts weren't normal. So when she would feel like she might do something bad to her son, she would give him to her sister. But her sister would give him back to Audie after she thought Audie was good again. Although she knew Audie was having thoughts about harming her own son. And she knew about Audie's severe mental illnesses as well. Their whole family did. There was several warning signs, but the baby was never taken out of her care. And this led to a devastating outcome. One night, Audie was staying with her mother and sister after she got in a fight with her baby father. Audie's sister had woken up to some loud screaming. It was Audie screaming after she had cut her son's head off and ate part of his brain. This is part 2 of why you should always take mental illnesses seriously. After Audie Sanchez had decapitated her 3-week-old son and ate part of his brain, she quoted, "I didn't mean to do it. He made me do it," referring to the devil. She first started hearing voices in her head when she took drugs for the very first time. Do not do drugs, kids. I'm telling you, you're gonna end up decapitating somebody. The saddest part about all of this is that this could have been prevented and that baby could have still been alive if people would have taken her mental illness seriously. Literally just 6 days before this happened, she had met with the counselor and told them that she had voices in her head telling her to harm her own baby. The counselor claimed this was her postpartum psychosis, which is when a mother responds negatively to her pregnancy, sometimes feeling like she needs to harm her child. Now, the counselor did report that Audie needed mental evaluation, but the hospital didn't see the severity of the situation because the counselor failed to mention that Audie was hearing voices specifically telling her to harm her own child. Once they evaluated her, they concluded that she just heard voices and had hallucinations. In court, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Story time about how my dad was on the news and now everybody knows my last name. So a little background information. This all happened whenever I was in 6th grade. This all happened on a Tuesday night. So I had school the next day. Well, my dad had went to work earlier in the day. Well, around 10 o'clock at night, we hadn't heard from my dad all day, which was super weird for him because he was always home around 10 o'clock. And even if he wasn't, he still would have kept in contact with us and let us know where he was at. So at this point, my family and I were really scared, and we're thinking that something happened to him. I was calling and texting him, my mom was calling and texting him. My whole family was pretty much trying to get a hold of him. Like, we had called all the hospitals to see if he was there. We called police stations to see if he might have been in jail or if they had his last name in the system. So nobody had heard or seen from him. So we all went to sleep that night hoping that he would show up in the morning. So the next day after I got home from school, my mom came home from work and she had told me about this phone call that she got. Like for part 2. Part 2 of how my dad was on the news and now everybody knows my last name. So like I said, my mom had gotten home from work and she told me about this phone call that she got while she was at work. So apparently one of her coworkers called her and said, "Hey, I think I saw your husband on the news." So after that, she showed me the news article and I couldn't even believe what I was reading. So I guess my dad had been drinking and he went to an auto repair shop and stole a car because I guess the keys were left in the door of the car. And what makes this even worse, the car that he stole had 2 guns in the trunk. And they weren't 2 pistols, these were 2 big ass guns that were fucking loaded. Oh wait, I forgot something. So before this, he had been at the strip club and somehow he ended up in pink lingerie. Guys, I cannot make this shit up. So he was driving around and he decided to park right in the middle of an intersection. And it was literally causing a whole fucking scene. There were people with their kids worried as hell. So after that, a few people called the cops, like for part 3.
Story time about a catfish that went way too far. My coworker Ron was always looking for girls way above his league on dating apps and social media. If the girl didn't look like a supermodel, he wasn't interested. He would always complain that the girls he liked would never respond. To make matters worse, Ron isn't the best looking guy in the world and he'd been out of the dating scene for a few years. We told him to lower his standards and be more realistic, but he wouldn't budge. One of my other coworkers named Jason decided to give him what he wanted and made a fake Facebook profile pretending to be a beautiful girl named Bella. He set her location to Canada and messaged Ron. Ron took the bait and they began messaging back and forth for months. He would always talk about Bella and how he couldn't wait to go to Canada to meet her. He was looking at plane tickets and talking about how he's been saving up for this trip. I was starting to think that this joke was going too far, but I hadn't seen anything yet. Ron came to work one day distraught and said that Bella had gotten into a terrible car accident and is in a coma that she wasn't expected to come out of. He said Bella's sister messaged him last night and told him the news. I figured Jason must have gotten bored of catfishing Ron and this was his way of killing Bella off and being done with it. Little did I know that Jason had no intention of stopping anytime soon and this was just the beginning. Part 2 about a catfish that went way too far. Ron was sad for weeks about the news of Bella being in a coma, but said that Bella's sister had been cheering him up. One day, Ron came in and told me that he's developed feelings for Bella's sister and they've been talking every day since the accident. I couldn't believe that Jason was still catfishing this man, now as a whole new character. Ron was happy again and falling for Bella's sister and was now talking about going to Canada to visit her instead. About a month later, Ron came into work frazzled. He explained to me that Bella had miraculously come out of her coma, which was great, but he had since moved forward with her sister. He said that Bella found out they had been talking every day while she was in a coma. He further explained that the sisters are now fighting over him and he doesn't know what to do. Just then, Ron looked at his phone and turned as pale as a ghost. Bella's sister made a public post on Facebook with Ron tagged that read, "You think your boyfriend is so good? Look what he sent me when you were in a coma," with private photos of Ron attached. This whole thing had already gone too far, but this was just taking it to another level. I finally spilled the beans and told him that it was Jason from electronics the whole time. Ron ran over there enraged and confronted Jason. They ended up fighting in the parking lot that same day, but somehow they're still friends and laugh about it now.